High Admiral Zixtal stood before the Varixian High Council, his iridescent scales shifting from deep purple to confident gold as he presented his findings. The massive crystalline chamber amplified his voice as he gestured to the holographic display of a blue-green planet spinning slowly in the center of the room. Esteemed council members, our long-range probes have discovered a pre-spaceflight civilization in Sector 7249. They call their world Earth and themselves humans. Initial observations suggest they possess rudimentary technology and highly predictable behavioral patterns. The council members chittered among themselves, their scales rippling with various shades of interest and dismissal. High Councillor Vexna, her scales a deep burgundy of authority, raised a clawed hand for silence. Elaborate on their technological status. Admiral, they have achieved basic atomic fission, primitive digital computing, and limited orbital capabilities. Their military forces still rely on chemical propellants and crude electromagnetic weapons. Most notably, they appear to lack any form of unified planetary government. Their world is fractured into competing nation-states. Perfect candidates for assimilation, another council member observed, scales flickering with anticipation. Indeed, Zixtal agreed. I propose we implement Standard Conquest Protocol 7, infiltration, assessment, and systematic replacement of their leadership structures. Given their technological limitations, I estimate complete subjugation within 2 planetary rotations of their star. Deep in the shadows of the council chamber, a figure watched the proceedings through cybernetically enhanced eyes. Dr. Elena Santos, Earth's first deep-cover operative in Varixian space, fought to keep her expression neutral as she continued her duties as a primitive maintenance worker. The Varixians had never considered that one of their target species might have already developed sophisticated holographic disguise technology. The council's discussion continued, none of them noticing the small drone, disguised as a common maintenance bot, transmitting their every word through quantum-encrypted channels to Earth's newly formed Sinological Defense Command. General Marcus Chen sat in the underground command center of XDC headquarters, watching the live feed from Dr. Santos' transmission. Around him, Earth's best military strategists and scientists analyzed every detail of Varixian technology and biology visible in the feed. They're so convinced of their superiority, Dr. Amit Patel, head of xenobiology, observed. Look at their scale colors. Their entire emotional display system is based on the assumption that other species can't possibly understand or manipulate it. Chen nodded. And that's exactly why Dr. Santos' cover hasn't been blown. They literally cannot conceive of us being advanced enough to deceive them. He turned to Dr. Sarah Williams, Chief of Counterintelligence. How are our other operations proceeding? Williams brought up a global holographic display. We've successfully inserted quantum observers into 17 major Varixian installation sites. They think they're setting up their infiltration bases in secret, but we're monitoring every move. Their encryption is actually quite sophisticated. They just never bothered to protect against quantum entanglement observation because they assumed we couldn't possibly have developed it. And the defense preparations. On schedule. Every major nation has quietly agreed to the Unified Defense Protocol while maintaining the appearance of continued political division. The Varixians are so focused on exploiting our apparent disunity that they haven't noticed the increased industrial activity in our underground facilities. A junior analyst rushed into the room, tablet in hand. General, we've decoded more of their tactical databases. You need to see this. Chen examined the data and allowed himself a small smile. They have no concept of electronic warfare. Their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming force and technological superiority. They've never faced an enemy that could adapt and improvise. Sir, Williams interjected, Dr. Santos is transmitting again. The feed showed High Admiral Zixtal speaking to a group of military commanders. The human internet will be our primary vector of control. Their primitive digital networks cannot possibly resist our quantum processing systems. Once we seize control of their communication infrastructure, Their civilization will collapse into chaos. Chen watched as the Virixian military leadership nodded in agreement, their scales showing confident blues and golds. None of them realized that humans had already developed quantum-resistant encryption algorithms, not because they had quantum computers, but because they had imagined the possibility of such attacks decades ago in what the Virixians would dismiss as entertainment media. Let them think they found our weakness, Chen ordered. Continue Operation Paper Tiger. Make our networks look vulnerable. Let them think their infiltration is succeeding. Dr. Patel looked concerned. They're moving faster than expected. The invasion timeline has been moved up. They plan to begin their open takeover in less than 6 months. Good, Chen replied, surprising some of his staff. The sooner they commit themselves, the sooner they'll learn their mistake. Humanity isn't what they think we are. We're not just another primitive species to be conquered. We're their worst nightmare. An enemy they don't understand, can't predict, and have severely underestimated. He turned to address the entire command center. For thousands of years, humanity has imagined, written about, and prepared for this exact scenario. While they were building their empire through brute force, we were creating countless stories about resisting technologically superior invaders. While they were dismissing us as primitive, we were wargaming every possible first contact scenario. They think they're being clever by hiding among us. We've spent centuries thinking about how to fight shapeshifters and infiltrators. Sir, Williams called out, Dr. Santos reports that the first wave of their leadership replacement program is about to begin. They're targeting key military and political figures. Chen's smile grew slightly wider. Perfect. Implement Operation Trojan Horse. Let them replace their chosen targets with their agents. Every single one of those positions has already been quietly shifted to advisory roles. The real power structures are already operating from our backup facilities. As the command center burst into activity, Chen watched the Virixian Council continue their planning, blissfully unaware that their every move was being monitored, analyzed, and countered. They thought they were the masters of deception, the superior species about to easily conquer a primitive world. They were wrong. Humanity had spent generations preparing for this moment, not through direct experience, but through something the Virixians couldn't understand: imagination. While they saw stories of alien invasion as proof of human primitiveness, they failed to recognize them as what they really were: preparation, practice, and planning. Send word to all command cells, Chen ordered. Operation Paper Tiger proceeds as planned. Let them think they're winning. Let them think we're weak. Let them think we're primitive and predictable. He paused, watching the confident Virixian leaders discussing their invasion plans. They wanted to conquer Earth. Instead, they're about to learn why you should never mistake storytelling for weakness or imagination for ignorance. In the shadows of the Virixian Council chamber, Dr. Santos continued her quiet observation, one of hundreds of human operatives now placed throughout Virixian space. The coming conflict would reshape the galaxy, but not in the way the Virixians expected. They thought they were starting a simple conquest. Instead, they had started a war against the one thing they couldn't understand or predict: human creativity. 3 months into the Virixian infiltration of Earth, Dr. Maya Patel stood in her underground laboratory, examining the captured alien technology through quantum microscopes. Around her, a team of international scientists worked in focused silence, each dedicated to understanding and countering different aspects of Virixian tech. The laboratory, buried deep beneath the Indian Ocean floor, was one of dozens scattered across the planet, all carefully shielded from Virixian detection. Their overconfidence is their weakness, Maya muttered, adjusting the microscope settings. They're so convinced of their superiority that they don't even encrypt their technology at the quantum level. Her colleague, Dr. James Morrison, looked up from his own workstation, where he was analyzing Virixian communication protocols. They never developed quantum encryption because they never imagined anyone could access their systems at that level. Their entire technological development has been linear, building on what works rather than exploring theoretical possibilities. Maya nodded, making another adjustment to her equipment. The captured Virixian device, a seemingly simple communication relay, pulsed with internal energy. "Look at this," she called to James. "Their entire tech base relies on crystalline quantum states, but they're only using about 30% of the available quantum dimensions. It's like they found one path that worked and stopped looking for alternatives." "Makes sense," James replied, walking over to examine her findings. "Their entire civilization is built on the principle of optimal efficiency. Why explore alternatives when you found something that works? They've never faced an enemy that could match them technologically, so they've never needed to innovate." Above their heads, buried sensors detected a Virixian scout ship passing overhead. Like all their surveillance craft, it was searching for signs of human military activity, completely unaware that humanity's real preparations were happening far below the surface. In another section of the facility, Colonel Sarah Chen, General Chen's daughter, supervised the testing of humanity's latest countermeasure. The device, barely larger than a coin, contained technology that would have been impossible just 6 months ago. Amazing what humanity could accomplish when given access to advanced alien tech and the motivation to improvise. "Run the test again," she ordered, watching as technicians activated the device. On their monitors, a perfect replica of normal human activity appeared, a false digital signature that would fool Virixian sensors. The real facility remained completely invisible. "Mirror protocol functioning at 98% efficiency," one of the technicians reported. "The Virixians won't be able to distinguish these signatures from genuine human activity." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Deploy them according to schedule. Let's give our visitors exactly what they expect to see." The Virixians had made a fundamental mistake in their assessment of human technology. They had assumed that humanity's visible tech level represented the full extent of human capabilities. They hadn't considered that a species might deliberately maintain a primitive appearance while developing advanced technology in secret. In orbit, aboard the Virixian command ship Eternal Dominion, High Admiral Zixtel reviewed the latest reports from his infiltration teams. His scales shifted through pleased shades of blue as he read about the successful replacement of several more human leaders with Virixian agents. "The humans suspect nothing," his executive officer reported. "Their communications continue to show political discord and technological stagnation. Their military forces maintain their primitive patrol patterns." Zixtel's scales rippled with satisfaction. "Excellent. Their behavioral patterns remain consistent with our initial assessments. Have our agents begun implementing Phase 2? "Yes, Admiral. We are gradually introducing subtle errors into their military communications and industrial processes. When we launch our main invasion, their resistance will collapse almost immediately." Neither officer noticed the small maintenance drone in the corner of the room, its quantum sensors recording every word and transmitting them through subspace to Earth's Defense Command. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in another hidden facility, General Chen reviewed the latest intelligence. Around him, the global defense network hummed with activity, each facility coordinating through quantum-entangled communications that the Virixians couldn't detect or comprehend. "Status report," he commanded. Dr. Williams stepped forward, her holographic display showing a global map marked with thousands of points of light. "Counter-infiltration measures are at 95% deployment. Every Virixian agent has been identified and is under constant surveillance. Their attempts to sabotage our military communications have actually improved our encryption protocols. We've learned more about their code-breaking capabilities from their attempts to hack us than they've learned about our real systems." And Project Mirror. Fully operational. The Virixians are seeing exactly what we want them to see. A planet of disparate nations barely holding together, with technology centuries behind their own. Every satellite they hack shows them carefully crafted data. Every human leader they replace is actually operating from a secure backup location. Every military base they monitor is projecting false signatures while our real forces prepare elsewhere. Chen nodded, studying the tactical displays. Humanity's real military strength was now hidden in vast underground complexes, orbital facilities masked as debris, and lunar bases the Virixians hadn't even thought to look for. Why would they? In their minds, humans were barely capable of reaching their own moon, let alone establishing secret bases there. "Sir," a young lieutenant called out, "we're detecting increased activity in the Virixian fleet. They're moving more ships into the system." "Right on schedule," Chen replied. "They're preparing for their final phase." As Dr. Patel completed the defense grid, Dr. Williams brought up another display, this one showing a complex network of quantum energy fields surrounding the planet. "The grid is ready. Based on Dr. Patel's analysis of their technology, it should completely disrupt their crystalline-based systems. They'll never see it until it's activated. And our offensive capabilities. The reverse-engineered weapons are in place. We've actually improved on their designs. They never thought to combine quantum crystalline technology with human innovations in plasma physics and dark energy manipulation." Chen allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Virixians had spent months meticulously implementing their conquest protocols, following the same strategies that had worked countless times before. They had no idea they were walking into the most elaborate trap in human military history. In her lab, Dr. Patel made the final adjustments to the quantum defense grid's control systems. The technology was a perfect fusion of Virixian crystalline engineering and human theoretical physics. The Virixians had developed their technology through careful, methodical advancement. Humans had developed theirs through wild theorizing, impossible dreams, and the stubborn refusal to accept limitations. "Testing final calibration," she announced to her team. The grid hummed to life, invisible to conventional sensors, but powerful enough to disable any Virixian ship that crossed its threshold. "Ready for full deployment on your command, General." Throughout the hidden facilities, humanity's real military forces conducted their final preparations. Weapons were checked, systems were calibrated, and soldiers reviewed battle plans that would have seemed impossible just months ago. They had trained relentlessly, incorporating centuries of science fiction scenarios into very real tactical doctrines. The Virixians thought they were about to launch a simple conquest of a primitive world. Instead, they were about to face an enemy that had spent generations imagining and preparing for this exact moment. An enemy that had turned their own overconfidence into a weapon. An enemy that had learned to hide strength behind apparent weakness. In orbit, High Admiral Zixtal gave the order to begin positioning his fleet for the final phase of conquest. His scales glowed with confident gold, never suspecting that every move, every command, every strategic decision was being monitored, analyzed, and countered by the supposedly primitive humans. The trap was set. The stage was prepared. And humanity was ready to teach the galaxy a lesson about the danger of underestimating a species that had spent its entire history imagining ways to defeat supposedly superior foes. High Admiral Zixtal stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, his scales radiating confidence as he watched his invasion fleet move into position around Earth. 5,000 warships, each a masterpiece of crystalline engineering, prepared to unleash the might of the Virixian Empire. The primitive humans wouldn't even understand what hit them. "Begin the communication blackout," he ordered. "Activate all infiltration units." Across the planet, Virixian agents in positions of power began implementing their programmed responses. Military communications should be going dark. Defense systems should be shutting down. The carefully orchestrated collapse of human civilization was beginning. Except nothing collapsed. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, scales shifting to confused yellow. "Our agents are reporting difficulties." "Explain." "Their shutdown codes aren't working. Human military communications continue unaffected. And we're getting strange readings from the planet's surface." Zixtal's scales darkened with annoyance. "Launch the first wave. The humans' primitive defenses won't." The sensor officer interrupted with a startled chirp. "Energy surge detected. Massive quantum field emanating from." Brilliant light erupted around the planet as humanity's defense grid activated. The invisible quantum web that Dr. Patel and her team had created sprang to life, its energy frequencies precisely tuned to disrupt Virixian crystalline technology. Throughout the invasion fleet, systems began to fail. Crystal matrices destabilized. Communication networks dissolved into chaos. Ships tumbled out of formation as their control systems went dark. In the XDC command center, General Chen watched the disaster unfold on his tactical displays. Status report. Defense grid operating at full capacity, Dr. Williams reported. 87% of Virixian ships are experiencing critical systems failures. Their quantum crystalline technology is proving even more vulnerable to our countermeasures than we anticipated. Launch the counter-offensive. All units, execute Operation Burning Mirror. From hidden bases across Earth's surface, humanity's real military forces emerged. Sleek vessels, powered by hybrid human Virixian technology, rose from underground bunkers and underwater facilities. From the dark side of the moon, strike craft that the Virixians had never detected powered up their engines. On the Eternal Dominion's bridge, Zixtal watched in disbelief as his invasion force fell into chaos. Impossible, he whispered, scales shifting to shocked white. Their technology level. They couldn't possibly. Multiple launches detected from the surface, his sensor officer reported, voice rising in panic. Energy. Signatures unlike anything in our database. They're using some kind of hybrid technology. The first wave of human counterattacks struck with devastating precision. Quantum disruptor beams, based on Virixian technology, but modified with human innovations, sliced through the crystalline hulls of invasion ships. EMP weapons, enhanced with dark energy modulators that the Virixians had never conceived of, shattered their defensive screens. In her laboratory command center, Dr. Patel monitored the effectiveness of humanity's weapons. The quantum disruption is exceeding expected parameters, she reported. Their ship's crystalline matrices are completely destabilizing. They never developed any defenses against these kinds of attacks because they never imagined anyone could weaponize quantum fields this way. The Virixian fleet attempted to regroup, to fall back on their standard tactical protocols. But those protocols had been developed for fighting conventional wars against conventional enemies. They had no contingencies for an enemy that combined stolen technology with completely alien innovation. Admiral, the tactical officer called out, human vessels are using some kind of phase shift technology. Our targeting systems can't lock onto them. They're somehow existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Zixtal watched as another wing of his fleet dissolved under human attack. The supposedly primitive humans were using weapons and tactics that shouldn't have been possible. Their ships seemed to ignore the laws of physics as the Virixians understood them. In the skies above Earth, the battle turned into a rout. Human forces, trained in tactics that the Virixians considered impossible or insane, struck from impossible angles, used maneuvers that defied conventional space combat doctrine, and employed weapons that shouldn't have existed. Status of the infiltration units. Zixtal demanded. No response. Admiral, we've lost contact with all ground forces. The humans, they knew. They've known all along. Our agents were compromised from the beginning. Deep beneath the Pacific, General Chen watched the Virixian fleet's disintegration with grim satisfaction. Launch Phase 2. Show them what humanity really is. New weapons platforms emerged from hiding. Massive installations, built in secret over the past months, powered up their main guns. Technology that merged human theoretical physics with captured Virixian engineering created effects that the Empire had never seen before. Quantum missiles, their warheads containing micro-singularities sustained by dark energy fields, streaked toward the largest Virixian vessels. The aliens had never considered using quantum technology this way. It was too unpredictable, too dangerous by their methodical standards. But humans had spent centuries imagining impossible weapons in their fiction. Now those impossible weapons were becoming reality. Admiral, the executive officer reported, scales now pale with fear. We're detecting new energy signatures. They're opening some kind of artificial subspace rifts. Our sensors can't. The first quantum torpedo detonated, creating a localized reality distortion that torn a Virixian dreadnought apart. The humans weren't just using superior firepower. They were using weapons that fundamentally altered the laws of physics on a local scale. All ships, full retreat, Sixtall ordered, his scales now ashen with defeat. Return to Imperial space immediately. Send warning to the High Council. The humans, they're not what we thought. They're not primitive. They're not predictable. His transmission was cut off as another wave of human attacks struck his fleet. The Eternal Dominion's crystalline hull shattered under weapons fire that shouldn't have existed, couldn't have existed by any reasonable development timeline. In orbit and the skies above Earth, the greatest invasion fleet in Virixian history fell apart in less than 6 hours. Ships were destroyed, disabled, or forced to flee by weapons and tactics they couldn't understand or counter. The supposedly primitive humans had not only matched Virixian technology, they had surpassed it in ways the Empire had never imagined possible. As the last Virixian ships fled the solar system, Dr. Williams approached General Chen with a final status report. Enemy forces in full retreat. Confirmed destruction or capture of 60% of their invasion fleet. Our casualties are minimal. The defense grid protected our forces exactly as designed. Chen nodded, watching the tactical display as human ships began recovery operations. And now they know. They know what humanity really is. Not just another primitive species to be conquered. Not just another predictable enemy to be overcome. We are something they've never faced before. A species that turns imagination into reality, that learns not just from experience, but from dreams. The first battle was over, but everyone in the command center knew this was just the beginning. The Virixian Empire would return, this time with full knowledge of humanity's capabilities. But they would find that humanity had more surprises waiting. Because while the Virixians had spent the battle following their standard protocols, human scientists had been studying their technology. Human strategists had been analyzing their tactics, and human engineers had been developing even more impossible weapons. The Empire had wanted war. Now they would learn just how dangerous it was to fight an enemy that had spent its entire history imagining ways to defeat supposedly superior foes. The real war was about to begin, and humanity was just getting started. 6 months after the failed invasion of Earth, Dr. Elena Santos stood in the shadows of another Virixian facility, this time on one of their core worlds. Her holographic disguise was no longer necessary. The Empire was now painfully aware of human technological capabilities. Instead, she wore the latest in human stealth technology, a suit that bent light and quantum fields around her, making her virtually invisible to Virixian sensors. Target located, she whispered into her quantum comm. Their central military database is exactly where our intelligence suggested. Security is heavy, but they're still using standard crystalline-based systems. Understood. General Chen's voice replied through the quantum entangled channel. Strike teams are in position across 17 Virixian worlds. Begin Operation Shattered Crown on my mark. In the months since repelling the invasion, humanity had not been idle. Earth's combined scientific and military resources had been devoted to understanding and improving upon Virixian technology. But more importantly, they had been studying the Empire's greatest weakness, its rigid, hierarchical structure. Throughout Virixian space, human strike teams prepared to demonstrate just how thoroughly they understood that weakness. The Empire had built its power on technological superiority and absolute control. They were about to learn the cost of that inflexibility. Strike teams. Execute, Chen ordered. Across 17 worlds, human operatives activated devices that Dr. Patel's team had developed. The quantum disruptors were smaller now, more focused, and designed to target specific frequencies within the Virixians' crystalline networks. Their entire command and control structure depended on these networks, and humanity had learned exactly how to shatter them. In the capital city of the Empire's throne world, High Counselor Vexna's scales shifted through patterns of increasing distress as reports flooded in. "How are they doing this?" she demanded. "Our defenses are the strongest in the galaxy. Our technology is superior. Our tactics are perfect." "Clearly not," a voice said from the shadows. Dr. Santos stepped into view, her stealth field deactivating. Around the council chamber, other human operators appeared, weapons trained on the Virixian leadership. "Your perfect tactics are predictable. Your superior technology is inflexible. And your strongest defenses were designed to stop enemies like you, not like us." Before the counselors could react, the human teams activated their devices. Throughout the massive crystalline structure of the Imperial Palace, quantum disruption fields pulsed through the neural networks that connected Virixian leadership to their forces. In an instant, the Empire's command structure was paralyzed. But this was more than just a military strike. Human intelligence had discovered something the Virixians had kept secret for centuries. Their empire wasn't just built on military might. It was built on the suppression of dozens of other species, all held in check by the same crystalline technology that humanity had learned to defeat. "Attention all beings under Virixian control," Dr. Santos broadcast through the Empire's own communication networks. "This message is being transmitted across all Imperial worlds. The Virixian defense systems have been neutralized. Their control networks are down. Their supposedly unbreakable grip on your worlds has been broken. Humanity offers you a choice. Continue to serve an empire that sees you as inferior, or stand with us and claim your freedom." In orbit above the throne world, Admiral Sarah Chen, recently promoted after her father's strategy had saved Earth, watched as chaos erupted across Virixian space. "Status report," she commanded. "Quantum disruption successful across all targeted systems," her tactical officer reported. "Virixian military communications are in chaos. Their automated defense networks are offline, and we're detecting widespread uprising activities on at least 12 subjugated worlds." The Virixians had never imagined this scenario. Their entire strategy for controlling their empire was based on technological dominance and rigid hierarchy. They had no contingency for an enemy that could not only match their technology, but turn it against them. They had no protocol for dealing with widespread rebellion coordinated by an outside force. In her laboratory on Earth, Dr. Patel monitored the quantum frequencies across Virixian space. "The disruption is cascading through their networks exactly as predicted," she reported to General Chen. "Their entire command and control structure is collapsing. They never built in any redundancies because they never imagined anyone could breach their security. But humanity wasn't just interested in destroying the empire. Even as their military strikes crippled Virixian control systems, human diplomats were making contact with the leaders of subjugated species. Earth had learned from its own history. True victory wouldn't come from simply defeating the Virixians, but from building something better in the aftermath. "Admiral," Sarah's communications officer called out, "we're receiving transmissions from multiple non-Virixian worlds. They're requesting assistance in overthrowing their imperial governors, and they're sharing intelligence about Virixian military installations on their planets." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Empire had spent centuries convincing itself and others of its invincibility. That illusion had been shattered not just by human weapons, but by human ideas. Ideas about freedom, self-determination, and the power of unity in diversity. On the throne world, Dr. Santos watched as the Virixian Council was taken into custody. "You still don't understand, do you?" she asked Vexna. "You thought technology alone made you superior. You never realized that true strength comes from adaptation, from innovation, from the ability to imagine something better than what exists." "This is impossible," Vexna protested, her scales cycling through patterns of confusion and fear. "We are perfect. Our systems are perfect. Our control is perfect." "That's exactly why you lost," Santos replied. "Perfect systems don't adapt. Perfect control breeds rebellion. and claiming perfection blinds you to your own weaknesses. Throughout Virixian space, the Empire's grip was crumbling. Worlds that had been under their control for centuries were rising up, using human weapons and tactics to overthrow their oppressors. Species that the Virixians had dismissed as primitive were proving just as capable of innovation and adaptation as humanity. In the XDC Command Center, General Chen watched the reports flood in. The operation was succeeding beyond their most optimistic projections. The Virixian Empire had spent centuries building its power through force and fear. It was falling apart in weeks because it had never conceived of an enemy that could think differently, fight differently, and inspire others to do the same. "Sir," Dr. Williams reported, "we're detecting massive fleet movements in the outer regions of Virixian space. Their remaining military forces are trying to regroup." Chen nodded. "Let them. They'll find that their standard response protocols don't work anymore. Every tactic they try, every strategy they implement, will be met by something they've never seen before. Because while they've been fighting this war according to their rulebook, we've been rewriting the rules entirely." The war wasn't over. The Virixian Empire still controlled vast resources and powerful weapons, but they were fighting a different kind of enemy now. Not just humanity, but every species they had ever oppressed, all armed with human technology and inspired by human example. They were about to learn that their greatest mistake hadn't been underestimating human technology or military strength. Their greatest mistake had been failing to understand that humanity's real power lay not in weapons or technology, but in their ability to imagine a better future and inspire others to fight for it. The Empire had wanted to conquer Earth. Instead, they had unleashed a force that would reshape the galaxy, not through dominance, but through the power of shared dreams and collective determination. 1 year after humanity's counteroffensive began, the Grand Chamber of the former Virixian High Council looked very different. Where once only crystalline-scaled Virixians had sat in positions of power, now representatives from 24 species gathered for the first meeting of the Galactic Concordat. The chamber's crystalline architecture remained, but it had been modified with technologies from 12 worlds, creating a space that represented unity rather than dominance. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the podium, her dress uniform carrying both Earth's insignia and the new symbol of the Concordat. Around her, delegates from formerly subjugated species listened intently, their various forms a testament to the diversity the Virixians had tried to suppress. "The last Imperial holdouts surrendered this morning," she announced. "The war is officially over." A ripple of various expressions of joy moved through the chamber. Some delegates changed colors, others emitted light patterns, while some simply smiled in ways unique to their species. Each had played a part in the Empire's downfall, contributing their own unique abilities and knowledge once humanity had shown them it was possible to resist. In a quiet corner of the chamber, Dr. Elena Santos sat with Dr. Maya Patel, both now recognized as key architects of the Empire's defeat. "Did you ever imagine it would end like this?" Santos asked, watching the celebrations. "Actually, we did," Patel replied with a small smile. "Humanity has been imagining scenarios like this for centuries. We just needed the opportunity to turn those imaginations into reality." The Virixian Empire had not fallen purely to military might. In the end, it had been undone by something far more powerful: the spread of ideas. Ideas about freedom, about cooperation, about the strength that comes from diversity rather than uniformity. Ideas that humanity had been exploring in its stories and dreams long before they reached the stars. In Earth's XDC headquarters, General Chen watched the proceedings through quantum-linked displays. Beside him, Dr. Williams provided updates on the ongoing stabilization efforts across former Imperial space. "The transition is proceeding faster than expected," she reported. "Former Imperial worlds are adopting the new hybrid technologies at an unprecedented rate. It turns out many species have been developing their own innovations in secret, just waiting for an opportunity to implement them." Chen nodded, studying the reports. The Virixians' greatest mistake hadn't just been underestimating humanity. It had been underestimating every species they considered inferior. Under their rigid control, dozens of civilizations had been forced to hide their true potential. Now that potential was being realized. In orbit around the former throne world, the combined fleet of the Conquerors conducted training exercises. Ships of human design flew alongside vessels that incorporated technology from a dozen different species. Each brought their own strengths, their own innovations, their own ways of thinking about space and time and physics. Amazing how quickly they've adapted our quantum disruption technology, Admiral Chen observed from the Conquerors' new flagship. The vessel itself was a testament to cooperation. Its hull was formed from Virixian crystals, but incorporated design elements from multiple species, creating something entirely new. Not just adapted, improved. Her tactical officer, a former resistance fighter from one of the first worlds to join humanity's cause, replied. The Dorsary figured out how to modify it to work through subspace. The Nexani developed a way to focus it through their organic technology. Every species is contributing something unique. This was perhaps humanity's greatest victory, not defeating the Empire, but helping to build something better in its place. The Concordat wasn't based on one species' dominance or one way of thinking. It was founded on the principle that diversity breeds innovation, that different perspectives make everyone stronger. Back in the council chamber, Admiral Chen concluded her address. The war is over, but our real work is just beginning. The Virixians built their empire on the belief that their way was the only way, that their technology was the peak of achievement, that their understanding of the universe was complete. They failed because they couldn't imagine alternatives. She gestured to the gathered delegates. Look around this chamber. Each of us sees the universe differently. Each of us has different technologies, different ways of thinking, different dreams. The Virixians saw this diversity as a weakness to be controlled. We know it's our greatest strength. In the weeks that followed, the changes that had begun during the war accelerated. Former imperial worlds flourished as they were finally free to develop their own technologies and cultures. The rigid crystalline networks that had once controlled the empire were repurposed, combined with technologies from dozens of species to create something new and more flexible. Trade routes that had once served only the empire's needs now carried ideas and innovations between worlds. Species that had been isolated from each other under imperial rule discovered they had developed complementary technologies. The combined scientific knowledge of 24 civilizations was creating possibilities that no single species could have imagined alone. Even the defeated Virixians were changing. The younger generation, freed from the rigid doctrines of imperial rule, began to question their assumptions about superiority and perfection. Some even joined the Conquerors' scientific initiatives, their understanding of crystalline technology proving valuable when combined with other perspectives. Dr. Petal found herself working with a young Virixian scientist who had secretly questioned imperial doctrine even before the war. Together, they were exploring applications of quantum crystalline technology that the Empire would have considered impossible or heretical. I never understood, the Virixian admitted, their scales showing patterns of enlightenment. Why we stopped exploring alternatives once we found something that worked. Now I see that every solution creates new possibilities, if you're willing to imagine them. This was the true revolution, not just in technology or politics, but in thought. The Empire had enforced a single way of seeing the universe. The Concordat celebrated countless perspectives, each offering new insights and possibilities. 1 year to the day after the war's end, humanity hosted the first Concordat Scientific Summit on Earth. Representatives from every member species gathered to share knowledge, propose joint projects, and imagine new possibilities together. The event was held in a massive facility that incorporated architectural elements from all member worlds, a physical representation of their new unity. General Chen, now serving as Earth's representative to the Concordat Security Council, watched as dozens of species that had once been bitter enemies or complete strangers worked together, sharing ideas and dreams. The Virixians had thought they were starting a simple war of conquest. Instead, they had catalyzed something unprecedented, the birth of a true galactic civilization. "You know," Dr. Santos said, joining him at the observation window, "the Virixians never understood why we created so many stories about resistance against overwhelming odds, about different species working together, about overcoming seemingly invincible enemies." Chen nodded. "They saw it as proof of our primitiveness, that we spent time imagining instead of achieving. They never realized we were preparing, not just technologically, but philosophically. Every story we told about cooperation between different species, every dream we had about overcoming impossible odds, was practice for this moment." Below them, the summit continued its work, creating the future that humanity had spent centuries imagining. The Empire had fallen not just to superior weapons or tactics, but to the power of shared dreams and collective imagination. They had wanted to conquer a primitive species. Instead, they had awakened something far more powerful, the combined potential of a galaxy finally free to dream together.